everyone's limited. Everyone is finite. Everyone does some things well, and no one does everything well. You see the world from your particular point of view. You have your particular experience, which is a preface for me trying to say something about W.E.B. Du Bois and the souls of black folk. I thought about not making videos for Du Bois because it may seem not only presumptuous, but maybe in itself offensive for a white person to to be the commenter on this classic text of I don't know what you would call it, political philosophy, social commentary on the African American experience. Um, you know, there's something to that, I think. But if I ask myself, well, why did I feel I had something to say about John Addington Symonds' problem of modern ethics? I'm not gay. What do I know? Why did I think I had something to say about Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman? I'm a man. So once you start doing that, I mean, even though every one of those objections has something to it, well, what do I have to say about Plato, really? I mean, or Machiavelli, or John Locke. I mean, I'm not really qualified, I suppose, really to weigh in on any of that. Or maybe it's different. I don't know. So, but I make videos, and I don't pretend to really have any authority ever. So I think it's just doubly obvious that I have no authority here. I'm just saying stuff. Okay, I can do that. What a great book this is, The Souls of Black Folk. What a classic book. Social commentary, social criticism, political protest, history, and autobiography. It is. It is a collection of articles that he wrote around the turn of the century, around 1900, and collected into this work. It's become a classic. And even after over a century, well over a century, it's still a real challenge, or he's challenging. But one of the first questions I asked you in the review questions was about this first claim that he makes. And keep in mind, it was 1903. The 20th century was still new. So he was prophesizing a little here that when he said that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. I mean, he was writing that around 1900. So he wasn't commenting on something that had happened. He was predicting something that would happen. I think that is such a great question to ask oneself 120 years later, with the 20th century all done, whether he was right about that, whether that was the problem of the 20th century. Let's face it, 20th century had lots of problems. The 21st century has lots too, but he's saying that is the central problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. I don't know. That's a really interesting claim as we look back at the 20th century. Was he right about that? This first chapter of our spiritual strivings, what do I have to say about it? But I would just point out a couple things that are really just incredibly important and interesting to me. The first is just a second. I gotta pause. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. I had to pause. There's a couple things I'd like to point out of, kind of everyone recognizes who reads this classic essay, first chapter, points out. But first is the unasked question. That is, as a black man mixing in white society in his time, Du Bois says that there's an unasked question that people, as you said, unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it, all nevertheless flutter around it. They approach me in a half hesitant sort of way, eye me curiously or compassionately. And then instead of saying directly, how does it feel to be a problem? They say, I know an excellent colored man in my town. Or I fought at Mechanicsville, right, Civil War. Or do not these Southern outrages make your blood boil? And that's a reference to lynching. At these, I smile or am interested or reduce the boiling to a simmer as the occasion may require. To the real question, how does it feel to be a problem? I seldom answer a word. Well, I think it is pretty clear what he means there. And that is that to be a black person in America at that time was to be a problem. And that meant that to be a problem to others. And I think at that, the overall philosophical inquiry of the souls of black folk, to my mind, is how do black people fit into America? And how shall America, what shall it make finally of African Americans and black people? Will they always be a problem to white America? I think. Now, of course, there's nothing inherently problematic about being black. There's something problematic to America. Right? Um, Perhaps the other biggest idea here in this great introduction is this very influential notion of double consciousness. Let me see if I can find it. Um, yeah, it's here on page 2, or excuse me, page 5. Um, and of course, he's using the language of the time. We wouldn't use the word Negro anymore, but he does, so there's no reason not to read it. After the Egyptian and Indian, the Greek and Roman, the Teuton and Mongolian, the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. I mean, the most powerful thing I've ever read having to do with American history. And I mean, I don't know. This sense of double consciousness, I have to think that this is a reflection of Dubois' study in Germany, because that's Hegel. I mean, it's Hegel's language. G.W.F. Hegel, the great German philosopher of the early 19th century, had a very influential book called The Phenomenology of Spirit, and he had one section of it called Lordship and Bondage, or Master and Servant, in which the struggle for recognition goes on. And it's a struggle of oppression, that when people are oppressed, when social groups are oppressed, they're also defined, or there's an attempt to define them. But this is something you see in Marx too. That is the ruler or the ruling class or the dominant social group tries to define the group that it oppresses. And so to be a member of an oppressed group, I take it to mean here, is to constantly have someone else tell you who you are. That you know who you are, I suppose. Everyone does. But there's always somebody else trying to tell you who you really are. This two-ness, this sense of alienation, of being told that you don't really belong, and being defined, being pigeonholed, being categorized. It's a very powerful and influential idea. And one could say that ultimately, what is Du Bois hoping for is a world, or at least a country, in which everyone does their self-definition and no one is subject to that kind of alienating experience of being defined by someone else.